A heavy distortion fills the mind with wonder and fear, a wasteland of ideas leaving the individual with unfathomable and unattainable secrets. The pit in which it rests grows deeper and darker, bubbling over to an end not yet visible, echoing through forgotten chambers to be swept aside to manifest stronger, culminating before into unbridled trepidation and the inability to escape. And so you run. And run Charlie did. Along the forest floor, the light fog shimmers as the sun peeks through the clouds, bringing morning birds with it. An eerie calm overtakes Charlie as he exits his lean-to and breathes in the crisp air. He strolls the perimeter and gathers wood. A log pokes from underneath leaves, and as he bends down to grab it, a snap echoes softly around, and with the air on his neck stiff, he too remains as such. The ground beneath his feet shakes, and the ants that crawl scurry past in search of shelter as a force fills the atmosphere with dread. Heart pounding, he spins around, log in hand, ready to strike, to find nothing. Scanning the area, his eyes the only thing that moves, he passes a print in the dirt of an animal he is unsure of. He takes in his surroundings once again, and feeling no immediate threat, continues to build a fire and cook breakfast before setting out further into the woods. For 3 days, Charlie has trekked the forest in pursuit of something he does not know. Has it been 50 or 1,000 kilometers I have walked? The heat intensifies with each passing day, and with the sun at its highest, along with the pack strapped to his back, sweat and fatigue takes hold. A log stretching from the trunk of a tree and curving up into a seat allows him to rest, reaching for a bottle of water and savoring every drop. He leans his head back with a sigh, the blue sky radiating peace. A hawk slices through the crumbling clouds before perching itself in a tree with its dark brown feathers that camouflage with the greenery. Charlie stares in awe at the bird, who lets out a shattering squawk as it tilts its head, eyes locked with Charlie's. Smiling, Charlie takes a deep breath as life fills his lungs. Growing bigger and bigger, the hawk spreads its wings, larger than any hawk Charlie had seen before, and with hostile resolve, the creature shouts with more force than possible, pervading the forest, commanding attention from all. Ears ringing, Charlie covers them, nails digging into his skin, drawing blood. His muscles, tense, begin to spasm before collapsing and dropping his water bottle, the sound taking control before it ceases. The gentle laughter of a woman replacing it. Confusion settles as the grasp around his ears loosen and the mocking gesture flows through the shrubbery. His worrisome eyes, wide with fear, squint as he lays on the forest floor collecting his thoughts. The presence overlooking that was the hawk is now gone. Pushing himself off the ground, Charlie stumbles out of breath with sore muscles and paces in search of a source, or his sanity. He does not make it far before his mood shifts, bringing his arms to his side as he stops, face emotionless. It is familiar, the laughter, and he wishes to not hear it. Days had passed since he prayed to never hear that laugh again, to push it to the furthest corner of his mind, and yet here it is, holding on to and torturing him. Has she got up to me? No, there is no one here. I would see her. The ambience of the forest lowers as the taunting merges with it, as Charlie leaves no sound unnoticed. She is near, he thinks to himself, and runs deeper without hesitation. The cold air brushes against the green tarp, thrown together without a thought, the weak knots twisting in the wind. Leaves crinkle as they float against the ground. Branches thump against stumps of trees older than the earth itself. Distant howls of the unknown seep into the soundscape that confine Charlie in its abyss, whose weary eyes flutter, yet his body remains full of adrenaline. With cracked lips, Charlie licks them with the little saliva he can muster and reaches for his water bottle as a gasp exits along with realization. Scurrying about the lean-to, he searches for what is not there, and in his haste knocks a log out of place, sending half the shelter crashing around. With a groan, he stops, allowing the night to calm with him. The chilled atmosphere, along with the warmth created by the embrace of the tarp, soothes as he cradles himself on the rough terrain. And as Charlie remains still and silent, he drifts to sleep. Hours pass as Charlie rests, the bliss amplified by the wind picking up leaves as they dance about the tarp, outlining his body, illuminated by moonlight that peers through thick bush. A shadow passes. Too tall to be an animal, but too short to be a human. It leaves no noise as it glides around the lifeless Charlie. Flowers, bright and bursting with color and beauty, that surround the campsite shrivel and die. Out of the dense forest comes a wolf, its gray fur heavy with the impending season change, and locks its sight on the sleepy traveler, stalking him, circling with caution. Each step forward is slow and methodical, to ensure its meal does not wake before the time to pounce. The wolf's mouth cracks with drool oozing from the sides, and its tongue dangles in anticipation, only to freeze, mere feet from its prey, with a confusion it cannot make sense of. Fear consumes the beast, who lets out a shattering whine, alerting Charlie, and with the commotion and sudden movement from underneath the tarp, the wolf retreats to the shrubbery, uncertain of its fate. The tarp encases Charlie as he struggles to break free, but he too reverts to the motionless body he was moments ago as he waits for a sign, whatever that may be. After some time, he gingerly pulls the tarp off, slowing his pace with every crinkle of the plastic, and as the last of the tarp slides down his face, he is met with darkness, a void stretching infinitely. While his eyes adjust and the woods take shape, he untangles his feet, freeing himself from the enclosure, and notices upon the flowers, not taking in the low hum of the forest, transitioning into a growl. The growl intensifies, breaking Charlie's stare from the flowers, its pitch constantly shifting so that the source cannot be found, and as if an evolving entity changes, the growling ceases as a shadow passes behind Charlie, who spins around to find nothing. Sweat drenches his forehead as the natural sounds continue again, leaving him in wide panic as he squints further into the thick void. The bushes, taller than himself, rattle with movement and the faint hum of laughter, and without another wasted second leaps to his aching feet and rushes out of danger, leaving his belongings. Through tear-filled eyes, the only sight is that of the blur of the trees as he zips past, stumbling for a few seconds before continuing without a care other than his life. His ears are bombarded with the sound of crunching leaves, wild animals scurrying in fright, wind whistling between the trees, sporadic laughter of a distant woman, and the haunting cackle of his exhausted lungs. A day or two of only night passes by as Charlie continues to sprint, his stomach warm and achy, growling with hunger as his chapped lips blister from dehydration. There is no end. The further he travels into the woods, the more woods there seems to be, and the distance between him and the entity that stalks never lengthens. With a weakness he has never felt, he begins to slow. His legs shake, and as he turns behind in hopes of finding nothing, he trips and plunges into the dirt, face first. Accepting his fate, he waits, though as his breathing becomes controlled, he is greeted with silence, the only sound being the crickets that chirp. Grasping his chest with bruised ribs, Charlie sits up, his breaths deep and full, taking in the last bit of air he will ever have. He moves his hands up his body, gently touching his skin, making notes of his injuries, and winces as his fingertips caress a gash along his cheek. Sight returning, he tilts his head towards the blackened sky with stars sprinkled at random. Pointing out the constellations is something Charlie can do within seconds, but not tonight, as they have no purpose. Pure chaos. The moment passes, and in pain quickly makes it to his feet and pushes onwards again, his eyes darting to the forest floor as he strides with care. Shifting his gaze from his feet to the obstacles ahead, Charlie stammers as a light at the edge of a tree line makes its presence known, and he hurries towards it in hopes of food, water, and shelter. And as he reaches the edge of the forest with a huff, he stands alone on a paved road, the harsh yellow lights that line it illuminating a row of houses on the other side. The air, heavy and warm, settles as Charlie peers down the row of houses that sit still and empty, their windows black and full with lush manicured lawns that surround, letting it be known people do live in them. A gentle breeze whistles, caressing Charlie. He turns his attention to the right and is greeted by the edge of the forest, and as he glances to his left, the road stretches, continuing beyond sight. With his back to the tree line, an uneasy force pushes him up to the road and begins his trek alongside the houses, his steps on the even pavement the only sound as the echoes encase him. The architecture that surrounds is from a different era, mid-century. The likes of the nuclear family, humble and pure, with the voids hidden within on full display, with a malevolent presence growing. Not even a porch light to signify life, nor any vehicles. The moon and the lamppost scattered 20 feet apart, the only source. On the sides of the houses, wrapped like a present, are 10-foot tall fences, carelessly pinned into the ground. The road curves, and the houses now line both sides, the forest fading to the background, with little difference except for the introduction of trees sprinkled among the lawns. With a change in scenery, the breeze ceases, and the rustle of leaves is replaced with a peculiar repose. Distorted shadows of the trees from the street lamps cover the houses at times, adding faces to what was once the abyss. His steps grow slower as his alertness strengthens. Glancing up at the light posts, a box makes itself known, a PA system scattered through the bizarre town. A low murmur builds, and Charlie inches closer to the speakers, though no sound is present. Instead, off in the distance is a hill, and just over that hill, the sound travels through the valley created. Nearing the hill, the murmurs become louder and clearer, yet foreign. Light peeks its way above the top of the hill, and, out of breath, Charlie climbs the steep incline with every step before reaching the top and looking down at a vast and empty field as a small building rests in the middle, the forest returning to view. There are people inside, the lights bright, and the murmur is clear. They are singing. Charlie, hesitating for a moment, sets out for the building, reaching the structure as the singing stops. He opens the door slowly, revealing a church, though the symbol positioned on the wall in the back is unfamiliar. People from all walks of life are seated among the pews, old and young, men and women, black and white, those with rich fibers and those wearing rags, while others lean against the walls or hang off their partners, captivated. At the end of the aisle, which separates the two groups of pews, is a small stage, hosting a piano, a solitary podium, and a wooden chair obscured by harsh shadows. A man rests in the chair. "I want to tell you all a story," the man belts, his voice filling the room in an inviting and demanding way. "I want to tell you a story you may have heard before. Maybe not the exact way I am about to tell it, but the basic premise is one you have heard before. In a book, perhaps. Or even in real life, whether it be your own or someone you are close to. I want to tell you a story about a bunny. The man slinks off the chair and walks over to the podium, his face lit from the light that dangles from the ceiling on a single thread. He wears a dark blue suit, the jacket unbuttoned, a black and brown striped tie, black shoes, his hair slicked back, and his horn-rimmed glasses resting in the middle of his fat and curved nose. His height and broad shoulders cast a shadow encompassing the enthralled crowd. The Reverend. This bunny was white, its coat bright and sheen. In fact, all the other bunnies were jealous of our little furry friend. A few spectators giggle. I'm sure every single one of you have felt jealousy before, right? Staggered agreeance passes through the crowd. There is nothing wrong with jealousy. Jealousy can drive us to become better. And who doesn't want to become better? But this particular bunny, you see, the Reverend paces along the stage, was terrified. He barely spoke. He barely ate. And he barely slept through the night. He was terrified of their jealousy. The jealousy that stalked him and crept up to the foot of his bed at midnight, his floorboards creaking as it inched its way closer. One night, pressed against his neck, he felt the cold tip of a knife, steady, ready to pull back with enough force to end his life. So he ran. He ran from village to village in search of solace, something he would not receive. There was a village, however, with a small population, smaller than ours here if you can believe that. An old man with a thick gray beard that hung below his knees lived in a worn-down house perched on top of a small hill overlooking the houses and villagers below. Everyone carried with them the utmost respect for him as he was wise, the wisest man perhaps to ever live. One day the bunny, tired and hungry, wandered into the town and asked for some water and food, but no one would lift a finger. Instead, they advised the bunny to seek the old man. And so he hopped up the hill. 4 grueling months passed without a sign from the bunny, nor the old man who ordinarily visited the shops below, before he hurried down that hill. He paid the villagers no mind and scurried along the way he came, returning to his rightful home. No more would he be afraid. No more would he allow the other bunny's jealousy to keep him up at night. No longer would he live in fear and have it control him or feed into its desire, for he now understands the truth behind the world. And the other bunnies, their jealousy switched from that of his fur to that of his wisdom. They begged him to relay the gospel, the message of the world to help them, but he could not. He could, however, help the healing process of those filled with fear. You see, it wasn't jealousy that drove them, but the fear of not being able to live a life free from the evils that plague them and rejoice in the warmth of the covenant. And rejoice they did. Now, I have been on the receiving end of this story many times before, and what occurs next varies drastically depending on the person reciting it. The truth is, no one knows what took place between the bunny and the old man in that house. But I know. I know it because I am the bunny. And I am here to help you. Do you want me to help you? Without hesitation, the congregation erupts joyfully with approval. Then why do I hear rumors of those planning to leave? The room falls silent, anxiety running rampant among the worshippers as the beat of their hearts fill the emptiness growing with vigor. You do not have to be here. No. You do not have to have the evils within you be vanquished. You do not have to partake in the wonders of the spirits. But you get to. You get to be relieved of trauma and pain and evil and fear. Fear is the most evil of it all. Fear is the one thing that drags you down, that causes you to fail, that takes over portions of your life you will never get back, and that brings misery, and you get to push it out and rejoice. Brother Paul, the Reverend shouts. Paul stands up, a round man with thinning blonde hair, deep dark bags underneath his eyes, and rough skin, who wears old yet clean clothes. What is it that you fear? Well, I'm afraid of dogs. Scattered laughs fill the room. At least he isn't afraid of public speaking, the Reverend barks. Fear is a natural thing, and judgment has no place here. Silence befalls once again, leaving the patrons with sour expressions, and heads down with embarrassment as the Reverend gawks. His gaze returns to Paul and motions for him to continue. I'm afraid of dogs, Paul utters. Or was. You helped me with that. No, I didn't. Confusion spreads. The Reverend slinks off the stage and saunters towards Paul. I haven't helped you, but I am helping you. Do you understand the difference? The journey isn't easy. The road isn't straight. The goal isn't clear. With arms stretched, the Reverend wraps himself around Paul, giving into the embrace without thought. And I want to keep helping you, okay? Can you let me do that? Paul nods his head as the Reverend backs away, because that is what is necessary. The Reverend snaps his fingers, and the crowd begin chanting in the same unknown tongue as before, their voices growing louder and more fierce as a cloaked individual emerges from a hidden door in the back, holding a chalice. Paul plummets to his knees, tears filling his eyes as he looks up at the Reverend. From deep within his lungs, the Reverend hums louder than the fellowship, the sound bouncing off the structure, causing it to rumble and shake. As he stops, the congregation continuing, the cloaked figure hands the chalice over to the Reverend, who feeds the liquid to Paul. He slows, but the Reverend tilts the cup further, and as the last drops pass his lips, Paul rises to his feet and exits the building alongside the cloaked figure, and the chanting ends as the Reverend reaches the stage. Charlie shudders, bewilderment and dismay taking hold. His eyes dart around the room at those in a trance, their expressions blank and unwavering in admiration towards the Reverend. His mesmerizing brown irises pierce Charlie's dreary eyes as he spins around on the stage. And what do you fear? The Reverend begins, his tone calm and soothing in opposition to the surroundings. Deep breaths escape Charlie, but no words suffice. Brother Mark, please take our new friend to my quarters so we may have a chat. He must have come for a reason. A brute makes his way towards Charlie, but stops as the Reverend raises his hand. Sister Mary, would you be so kind as to escort our esteemed guest instead, and wait with him? Crowded by the others, Mary breaks through and makes her way towards Charlie, extending her hand in assurance. His eyes widen and twist as he sees a bruise along her arm. Reluctant at first, Charlie takes her hand, and the pair walk off, out of the building, and towards a pristine house a few yards away. The wooden chair creaks with the slightest movement, as Charlie shifts uncomfortably, the bottom being eaten away by its own rotting body. In front is a desk, robust with pristine mahogany and shimmering finish, with papers and pens neatly stacked on top, and a rotary phone placed on the edge, the only modern appliance in the room. Behind the desk is a door. Stuck in a corner, out of his sight, seats Mary, who, refusing to speak, stares at the back of Charlie's head, her presence heavy. Her silence was felt during their walk towards the building, her face twisted with urgency to inform Charlie about something, but whatever it is, he could not tell. Their attention is stolen as the door swings open and the Reverend steps in, his broad shoulders misleading as his skinny arms latch the door closed behind. He looks upon Charlie and smiles, his eyes gleaming with a stale confidence, before thanking Mary, and takes a seat behind the desk, his features shrinking further. A few moments pass with ambient conversation before the Reverend leaps into a script, an attempt to make Charlie crack, to open up and spill his fears and insecurities. Charlie refuses the advances. With a strange and awkward smile that he catches every so often, the Reverend leans back in his chair. He diverts his gaze to Mary, who cowers and delves into her story, with eyes glancing back and forth between the pair. Mary lived a sheltered life, the world a distant planet her parents kept her from, until the eyes of her husband met hers. His mind filled with lust and admiration, much like hers, yet turned with hatred and malice. Unknown marks littered her body as the memories faded and days passed. One day, she smiled. She smiled because her husband had been gone for 3 days, and the pain began to wash away. But with that came the fear of his return, and the continuance of suffering. There was no way she could stay, and there was no way she could live her life any longer with this feeling that dug its way deep into her soul, until she ran into the arms of the Reverend. Charlie speaks up, accosting the Reverend for forcing Mary to relive her traumas, and as he turns his head to face her, the Reverend slams his palm onto the desk, the thud ricocheting off the dense walls, screaming for Charlie to not interrupt. An eternal, vile silence fills the air. The tension stalls as the Reverend slicks his disheveled hair into place and puts a smile back on his face. "I'm sorry," the Reverend retorts, "but being interrupted is one of my pet peeves. I'm sure you understand." Without skipping a beat, the Reverend grabs a piece of paper and a pen and returns to questioning Charlie. The previous interaction returns, and with the evening going nowhere, the Reverend drops his pen and looks into Charlie's eyes. Analyzing his movements, the Reverend formulates his thoughts before speaking in a low voice. "You fear intimacy, don't you? Perhaps you were abused much like our dear friend Mary." There is no verbal response, as the Reverend smirks. The night air is crisp but warm, as Charlie saunters back and forth in and out of the singular light above the door, casting rough shadows on the face of Mark as he stands guard. He is waiting for Mary to escort him to his temporary sleeping quarters. Bringing his hand up to his mouth, Charlie lets out a yawn as his eyes flutter from exhaustion, but is cut short as a distant male scream echoes from the trees. Mark, with a grungy voice, urges Charlie to pay no attention to the sound, that forest animals make noise at night. As Mark finishes, another scream, followed by a thump, fills the field, and as Charlie looks to the forest with worry, the ambience fills with the chirping of cicadas. The door bursts open as Mary exits the building, tears staining her cheeks, with the Reverend close behind. A single glance is needed, and Mark enters the building alone. The three, motionless, take in the evening. The Reverend makes note of the music of the forest animals as it cascades throughout the land. Before anything else can be spoken, Mark returns with a cup and offers it to Mary, assuring Charlie there will be water for him in his cabin. She refuses. Slinking closer, the Reverend extends his lanky arms to Mary and insists that she take the drink to calm her, to allow her anxiety to wash away, and that he won't let her leave without drinking. And so she does. Turning with force, the Reverend grips his bony fingers around her arm, encouraging her to prove she swallowed. Mouth wide, he inspects it and pushes them on their way. As the pair walk off, the gravel crunching beneath their feet, Charlie peers behind him and watches the Reverend and Mark disappear into the building and turn the light out, encasing it in blackness. The well-furnished cabin houses a low-resting blue couch in front of a large bay window overlooking the street, a wool rug bursting with color, and a coffee table resting on top, an end table with a rotary phone attached to the wall, and a pristine circular glass ashtray. Charlie paces as Mary hurries into the bathroom, the cramped hallway illuminated by the light glistening off the wood paneling. Blackened windows from the houses across the street beckon for Charlie as he squints for a further look, catching subtle movements from inside. His heart pounds as another comes through, and then another, before his concentration is broken by the sound of dry heaving. He rushes to the bathroom and finds Mary hunched over the toilet attempting to vomit, her eyes bloodshot as tears roll down her cheeks. She thrashes and shouts through clenched teeth for him to leave her alone as he kneels beside her in an attempt to console. She puts her fingers down her throat, yet nothing comes up, and collapses on the cold tiles, sobbing. Mary wipes her staining eyes and asks through weakened, broken gasps if he had taken the drink she had. He did not. "He will be coming," she blurts out in her weakening state. "But he isn't real." Charlie asks what is going on, but all Mary can muster is to urge him to leave as far away as he can, that there is a town a few miles away through the woods where they are not welcome. Much like the Reverend, she is steadfast in her resolve and will not take no for an answer as her sobs intensify. Unsure what to say or do at first, he takes her advice and rushes about the house in search of supplies long forgotten. A first aid kit underneath the sink in the bathroom, a backpack in the closet, cans of beans and boxes of granola bars in the kitchen, and 3 water bottles. Eager to replenish his energy, he sips the water and winces as the liquid caresses his split lips, burning as if to taunt him. A hushed scream comes from Mary as she huddles in pain, seeking shelter from her attacker. Charlie hurries to the bathroom but freezes in the living room as he stands in front of the window, the houses across the street filled with harsh yellow lights and the beady eyes of their occupants. Mary screeches again. He breaks from his trance and enters the bathroom to cradle her in his arms, reassuring that she has nothing to be afraid of. Taking a few moments with her panicked weeping, he asks her to come with him. He too will not relent. Holding her hand, Charlie maneuvers through the yard, keeping low, his eyes sweeping around their surroundings. The gentle crunch of the leaves resonate as they drift about. The rickety fence towers over Charlie as he scans to his left and right and around, taking note of the gate, which is not there. Mary turns back to the house and lets go a short scream before Charlie grips his hand against her mouth. As her breathing stabilizes, the sound of distant and staggered footsteps on cold concrete fill the space. Frantic, with sweat drenching his brow, Charlie takes Mary's hand, forcing her to latch onto the top of the fence, and pushes her up onto it. She straddles the top as it sways, and once she balances herself, slinks down to the other side. Charlie tosses the backpack over and climbs, the creaking of the wood alerting the townsfolk as the footsteps speed up. Smashing onto the ground, Charlie stifles a whimper with his twisted ankle before grabbing the backpack and Mary's hand as he limps forward. Masked by darkness, Charlie and Mary remain towards the ground, lurking about the trees and the buildings as the congregation searches for them. They get closer and closer, only to be pushed further away as more townsfolk join the party, and their destination becoming more unknown. A squeal pierces the heavy air, causing Mary to shudder as digital silence follows, filling the near empty space with a hum of dread before the Reverend clears his throat. His voice is slow and soft, hiding his cruel intent. He urges the pair to return to their home, to rest for the evening, and that no harm shall come to them. Exit from the shadows so we may help you, and we can end this unfortunate debacle. His voice, increasing with frustration, echoes and disappears as it hits the trees. Mary and Charlie continue along a path between the houses, reaching the hill, while the Reverend's harangue resumes through the spotty PA system, his facade stripped and deteriorating with every syllable. The Reverend stands in front of the church with mic in hand, and pacing back and forth, his hand gestures exaggerated. His physique is short and twisted compared to the small group that surrounds him, on alert for any movement. An opening around the hill is the only way out, and Charlie pulls Mary with him, whose eyes are now shut. Rounding the hill, they drop to the ground as a church member stands guard, previously out of sight, and with the thud arousing their attention, though conducts a thoughtless inspection. As they lay on the ground, Mary starts to whimper, her hallucinations now auditory and visually intensifying through clamped eyes, losing grip with reality. Knuckles turn white as her fingers dig into the dirt. She begins to shake as she bites her lip to keep from screaming. With the faintest whisper, Charlie asks for Mary to open her eyes and put all her attention on the trees in front of them. Like an iron door, she peels them open and nods at Charlie when she sees the trees. Licking his lips, followed by an anxious breath, he shoots up from the ground and shouts for her to run as fast as she can and to not look back. The guard chases Charlie, allowing Mary to sprint with all the adrenaline coursing through her body towards the trees. A few others from around the building go after her, but soon turn their attention to Charlie as her flailing body disappears into the bushes. Charlie looks on with a smile at the empty tree line, slowing down enough for the man to gain terrain and caress the backpack with his fingertips. Thinking quickly, Charlie tosses the backpack off, hitting the attacker as he stumbles, saving seconds before the chase continues. Now lighter, Charlie weaves in and around the others in pursuit, with the Reverend's full and agitated voice stammering and out of control. At a glance, Charlie looks in the Reverend's direction, who stares back with wide, protruding eyes, the anger overshadowed by worry, his mask coming off. Charlie makes it to the tree line and rushes far within, the pain from his ankle increasing with every stick and mound he lands on. The Reverend calls everyone off. Without the pack, his voice reverberates, the woods will have them instead. Heavy laughter comes forth and dims the deeper he runs, the snap of twigs and the cold air brushing past all that remain. He comes to a stop and calls out to Mary through raspy breaths. The twisted branches cast by the moonlight, all he can see as he slinks along the trunks of trees before finding her curled in a ball, sobbing, eyes shut once again. He sits beside her and holds her head in his hands in a bid to comfort, though the pit that caused him to seek refuge in the forest at first opens wide again. The calmed and exhaustive sigh from Mary, however, is oddly pacific and allows his mind to think, to free himself of distortion and unfamiliarity. Tomorrow comes another day, and another day comes the opportunity to repair the damage done and regain the future with no need to escape, and no secrets need explanation to thrive. He laughs.